Aujourd'hui, maman est morte, ou peut-être hier, je ne sais pas. Today, mom died, or maybe yesterday, I don't know. Okay, this is the beginning of The Stranger, a novel by Albert Camus. This is my old Italian copy, very old. It's quite disruptive. And I was 16. I was at home looking for a novel to read. And among the books in my mother's bookshop, one title caught my attention, The Stranger. I opened the book and came across that incipit, that beginning. Today, mom died, or maybe yesterday, I don't know. Well, I was overwhelmed. How do you not know the day of your mother's death? How is it possible? How do you take such news with such carelessness? Who is this character? Why does he react that way to his mother's death? I wanted to answer to all these questions. So I started the book and devoured it. What a great way to start a story. Welcome, my name is Enrico Di Nola. I'm from Turin, Italy, and I deal with communication and training. And in the next 45 minutes, I will tell you what storytelling is and how to use it. But first, I think that you are curious to listen to another beginning of a great novel. Et voila. Somebody must have slandered Joseph K. for one morning without having done anything wrong. He was arrested. Again, the questions. Why did they arrest an innocent? This is the beginning of the trial by Franz Kafka, probably you know it. Why did they arrest an innocent? Was he really defamed? Who is this Joseph K? Why is the surname not revealed to us? But is he really innocent? What will he do now? What's going to happen? Okay, here, after reading a simple sentence, 1,000 questions appear in our mind. Questions to which we want to give an answer. Okay, why does such a start work? First of all, because it intrigues. And all of us, more or less, are curious. We are curious. At just 9 weeks old, a newborn baby is more attracted to new images than familiar ones. We are tireless inquirers and we love to give answers to our questions. You know, no, you don't know, but I have 2 children, 5 and 8 years old. Last summer, probably, you know, if you also have children. Last summer, I counted all the questions that my 8-year-old asked his mom and me during a 6-hour car ride. About 130 questions in 6 hours in a car trip for over 6 hours. So, if you think that we are going next Saturday to make the same trip for Easter, and my son hasn't stopped asking questions, think of me next Thursday, because I need I need your help, mental help from every part of Europe. Okay, let's continue. Another thing we love is mystery. something that doesn't seem to have an explanation, or maybe it does, and we can find out. If you think about it, entire TV series keep us glued to the screen for dozens of hours, playing on this single aspect of our being, mystery. We love it. Alfred Hitchcock said, "There is no terror in the shot itself, only in its expectation." Creating a state of alarm is another technique that has a strong hold on us. And you know, Hitchcock was the master of suspense. His entire career was built on this sense of waiting, distressing and compelling at the same time. But why we are so interested in other people's stories? We could give a damn about one who doesn't care about the death of his mother, or another who has been arrested, right? Why should we fear for the life of a character in a movie they are about to shoot? Why? Because we are hyper-social beings. We want to be part, and we tend even if we don't want to, we identify with others. Okay, I told you at the beginning that today we will talk about storytelling, but what do you think it is? What definition would you give? Chat me if you want your definition of storytelling for you. What it is storytelling? Try to answer, try to give your answer. In the meantime, I drink.
Okay, you are called to an action.
What do you think storytelling is? Telling a story to convince people to do something, okay. Thank you, Chiara. Creating an intriguing storyline, a hero story, okay. Tell a story engaging the public, make a story interesting, try to describing in original way. Oh, a lot of answers. Thank you so much. Being able to interest people. It's a tool in order to engage people. Tell a story to explain something, okay. Making pictures in one's head, very interesting. Okay, thank you very much. Now we will see the definition of storytelling, okay? Expert, what expert says. They say that storytelling is communication through narration. It seems to be simple. In fact, there is a subtle difference between telling a story and building an effective narrative. I don't know if you can see the little difference. And it is the difference between doing good storytelling and doing it wrong. Okay, we will see it. First, we must know that storytelling is something that concerns us in a constitutive way. Our brain is built to receive and formulate stories. If you think about it, we tell and listen to stories from morning to night. To communicate, I don't know if you can think about it. To communicate to another person, I have to organize a story, making choices, what to say and what not to say. I have to create a narrative architecture to tell you something, okay? This is true for any communication. I have to create a narrative architecture if I have to tell the accident I had with my car yesterday, for example. I have to create a narrative architecture to share how my day was at dinner with my family. Or moreover, for example, at work, I have to create, again, a narrative architecture if I have to present a project, okay? We do create narrative architectures every day, many times a day, okay? Without realizing it, because our brain does it automatically or almost automatically. The studies on our brain of the last 40 years have removed the last veil of objectivity. And now we have no doubts. The world we perceive as out there actually is not out there. It is only a reconstruction of what that happens inside our head, okay? It's a creative act of our narrator brain. This is something like a revolution. Okay, let's get our heads together. Let's have a little recap. We said storytelling is communicating through narrative architectures, 1. 2, our brain is designed by nature for this behavior, and this behavior makes us irresistibly curious about the stories of others. Okay? Okay, well, now we have to see in which areas we can apply, in which fields we can apply storytelling, in addition to everyday life, as we have seen. Okay, we talk about books, about novels, about tales. We said the movies, okay, but also, for example, photography. Look at this photo. Probably someone has recognized this picture by Sebastião Salgado, the great Brazilian photographer. And the question is, isn't it narrative? Look at the picture. There is the story of all the effort and hardship of hundreds and hundreds of workers in the mines. It's a story of exploitation, of deprivation, a story of suffering, all in one single shot. So also photography can be storytelling, can be an area, a field of storytelling, okay? But we can apply storytelling on video games, economics, medicine. We can apply it on religion. Think of the communicative leap from Pope Benedict XVI to Pope Francis. Pope Francis has brought us into a narrative universe that he fits continuously in everything he does. He never stops telling stories. This is the big difference compared to Pope Benedict. You remember Pope Benedict, the difficulties he got to communicate. With Pope Francis, we are immersed in a coherent and continuous narrative universe. So also religion is a field of application of storytelling, but also politics. What is propaganda but the creation and the dissemination of a narrative for political purposes? I don't know, but if you know, but did you know that Pentagon and Hollywood have been collaborating officially, at least since 1999, with a funded institute, with an institute created by the government, by the USA government, funded each year with $100 million. Okay. And if you look carefully at this picture, you will find that this is true, because there is no there's no anything is left to the case. Okay, look carefully at this picture. This is the president of the United States of America, the former president, George W. Bush. And this picture is a part of the press conference organized on the aircraft carrier Abraham Lincoln on the 1st of May 2003, when USA wanted to say to the entire world that the war against Iraq ended. Okay, so look at the picture. Does it seem to you that the shot is random? This is clearly a staging, where nothing has been left to chance. It was designed and organized by a communication team, including a set designer. The mission, as you can read, is accomplished, and the colorful people, bottom left, symbolize the peace, the hope obtained, thanks to the American work in Iraq. Okay, in short, we can say that storytelling can be applied and is actually applied in almost all fields. Even in the business world, in which we call it corporate storytelling, and it would be a very fascinating topic, but not today's theme. So we won't talk about corporate storytelling, but about Apple, yes, and especially its founder, Steve Jobs, because I want now to show you the first piece, the first part of the speech he gave to the graduates of Stanford University in 2005. It's a quite famous speech. Maybe you know it. Okay, let's look at it together, and then we will comment it. I will take it. Just a moment. I hope that you can listen correct. Can you hear?
This program is brought to you by Stanford University. Please visit us at stanford.edu.
Thank you. I'm honored to be with you today for your commencement from one of the finest universities in the world. Truth be told, I never graduated from college, and this is the closest I've ever gotten to a college graduation. Today, I want to tell you 3 stories from my life. That's it. No big deal. Just 3 stories. The first story is about connecting the dots. I dropped out of Reed College after the first 6 months, but then stayed around as a drop-in for another 18 months or so before I really quit. So why'd I drop out? It started before I was born. My biological mother was a young, unwed graduate student, and she decided to put me up for adoption. She felt very strongly that I should be adopted by college graduates, so everything was all set for me to be adopted at birth by a lawyer and his wife. Except that when I popped out, they decided at the last minute that they really wanted a girl. So my parents, who were on a waiting list, got a call in the middle of the night asking, "We've got an unexpected baby boy. Do you want him?" They said, "Of course." My biological mother found out later that my mother had never graduated from college and that my father had never graduated from high school. She refused to sign the final adoption papers. She only relented a few months later when my parents promised that I would go to college. This was the start in my life. And 17 years later, I did go to college. But I naively chose a college that was almost as expensive as Stanford. And all of my working class parents' savings were being spent on my college tuition. After 6 months, I couldn't see the value in it. I had no idea what I wanted to do with my life, and no idea how college was going to help me figure it out. And here I was, spending all of the money my parents had saved their entire life. So I decided to drop out and trust that it would all work out okay. It was pretty scary at the time, but looking back, it was one of the best decisions I ever made. The minute I dropped out, I could stop taking the required classes that didn't interest me and begin dropping in on the ones that looked far more interesting. It wasn't all romantic. I didn't have a dorm room, so I slept on the floor in friends' rooms. I returned Coke bottles for the 5-cent deposits to buy food with. And I would walk the 7 miles across town every Sunday night to get one good meal a week at the Hare Krishna temple. I loved it. And much of what I stumbled into by following my curiosity and intuition turned out to be priceless later on. Let me give you one example. Reed College at that time offered perhaps the best calligraphy instruction in the country. Throughout the campus, every poster, every label on every drawer was beautifully hand calligraphed. Because I had dropped out and didn't have to take the normal classes, I decided to take a calligraphy class to learn how to do this. I learned about serif and sans serif typefaces, about varying the amount of space between different letter combinations, about what makes great typography great. It was beautiful, historical, artistically subtle in a way that science can't capture, and I found it fascinating. None of this had even a hope of any practical application in my life. But 10 years later, when we were designing the first Macintosh computer, it all came back to me. And we designed it all into the Mac. It was the first computer with beautiful typography. If I had never dropped in on that single course in college, the Mac would have never had multiple typefaces or proportionally spaced fonts. And since Windows just copied the Mac, it's likely that no personal computer would have them. If I had never dropped out, I would have never dropped in on that calligraphy class, and personal computers might not have the wonderful typography that they do. Of course, it was impossible to connect the dots looking forward when I was in college, but it was very, very clear looking backwards 10 years later. Again, you can't connect the dots looking forward. You can only connect them looking backwards. So you have to trust that the dots will somehow connect in your future. You have to trust in something, your gut, destiny, life, karma, whatever, because believing that the dots will connect down the road will give you the confidence to follow your heart even when it leads you off the well-worn path, and that will make all the difference.
Okay, sorry if there were problems. I didn't notice anything. I cannot do anything to solve it, to solve them. Okay, I take again the presentation. Okay. Okay. So why does the story of Steve Jobs?
Enrico,
Sì, dimmi.
we see the not the presentation, but rather your screen.
Ok. Allora, proviamo. Let's try.
Do you have a Mac or a Windows?
PC. I close the presentation and okay, now
Now we see the PowerPoint. Okay.
Yeah.
No, it's okay.
Very good. Okay. Why does the story of Steve Jobs reach us so strong and capture us? Why? Have you heard of, have you listened to the story? This is the first of 3 stories of his life. Why does the story is so strong? Because it speaks of himself, of his difficulties, of defeats, but also of faith and struggle. Poor little Steve hasn't been born yet, and life is already putting him in front of some very hard trials. We feel close to him. We feel empathy. Think about it. He could tell how beautiful and powerful Apple is. Or Pixar, for example, Disney Pixar. Tell about his professional success. Instead, he tells us that he was hungry and made one mistake after another. One of the most interesting things is that he declares it at the beginning. I will only tell 3 stories of my life. No big deals. 3 stories we can relate to and learn from. Okay? At the beginning of this lesson, we saw 2 effective incipits, beginning, to begin a story. Well, even Steve Jobs started his speech immediately placing himself at the level of the public, indeed almost below it, because he confesses that he never graduated, okay? The Latins would have called this technique captatio benevolentiae, that is the effort that the speaker makes to get the audience on his side. This is another technique to bring your audience closer to you. Get off the pedestal and make them feel at case. We are the same. I'm not better than you. Okay.
So, okay. Good.
Daniele?
No, it's okay.
And what about the narration of our everyday lives? Aren't social media this? Don't they make our little personal life public, accessible to everyone? My story shared with the entire world. Here is again evident our need to tell our lives and enjoy the stories of others. So, as Christian Salmon says, he is an expert of storytelling, storytelling is experiencing since mid-90s a surprising success. Okay, let's make a recap. So storytelling can be applied in almost all fields, and it has been experiencing incredible success. But where do the stories we tell come from? Is it possible to define a common pattern to most stories? And above all, how do you build a story, a tale, a narrative effective? Okay, Roland Barthes, the great French semiologist, said that the story is present in all times, in all places, and in all societies. The story begins with the very history of humanity. So, again, we are made of stories from the dawn of time. Think, for example, of fairy tales. Have you noticed that in the narrative structure they are similar? Think about it. Most fairy tales have the same narrative structure. It is always the same story. From a beginning of stability, a hero or a heroine must face a challenge or more challenges. And in the end, after 1,000 difficulties and at the risk of life, he or she succeeds and is a new person with a new stability. So how is it possible that this story is always the same, always and everywhere? How is it possible? The same story always and everywhere? Well, it's because fairy tales are the transfiguration and the transformation of ancestral rites. Today, we barely know what a rite is: baptism, wedding, funeral, little else. But once it was a fundamental component of community life, okay? Permeating everyday life, not only certain moments. From the ritual, we have passed to myth, official story, and fairy tales, popular story. Myths and fairy tales are the reflection of the rites of passage and initiation, for example, from childhood to puberty, which always pass through death and rebirth. Myths and fairy tales are the reflection of the rites of passage and initiation, which always pass through death and rebirth. Okay, it's a bit cryptic, I know, but now I'll explain to you better. Think about Little Red Riding Hood, okay? We all know about, we all know this fairy tale. Little Red Riding Hood must cross the woods, and this is the initiation rite, and die, eaten by the wolf, to be reborn and save, thanks to the hunter, the grandmother. Okay. Snow White runs away into the woods, dies from the witch, initiation rite, and is awakened from the princess kiss. Same story. Sleeping Beauty, same plot. The Ugly Duckling, similar plot. Hansel and Gretel, they experience the realm of the dead in the witch's house, and they return to the living. Okay, it's always the same story. We can affirm this thanks to scholars such Vladimir Prop, the Russian scholar, and Joseph Campbell, the American one. It's called monomyth or hero's journey. It's like the plot of 90% of Hollywood movies, if you think. And it's like that. Often the death is figurative, of course. It is not real or takes the form of the monster, for example, to defeat, or the difficulties to cross, but is always the same story. And here is the plot of the monomyth. From an initial, you can see it's the plot also of fairy tales. From an initial stasis, when everything is okay and equal to itself, to a breakdown of the balance, which leads to challenge, struggle, trials. And in the end, our hero emerges victorious until a new and better balance is re-established. Okay, in Y, there is the experience of death, an experience that had always fascinated and terrified humanity. Death as an opportunity for rebirth, as a revitalizing occasion. And if you think about our life, this is the plot of each of us. That's why it's universal. Pay attention to it in the next movie you watch or in the next novel you read. Probably you will find the monomyth, or also called the hero's journey. Okay. Okay, let's recap. 1, we are made of stories from the dawn of time. 2, the vast majority of stories follow the same narrative track, the monomyth or the hero's, also called the hero's journey. 3, the monomyth is a metaphor. The monomyth works well because it is the story of each of us, of his difficult and his struggle primarily to defeat or avert death. Okay. Cinema is the most direct way to compete with God. This sentence was said by Federico Fellini, the great Italian movie maker. And what does Fellini wanted to say? Fellini tells us that creating a story gives us a sense of omnipotence. Communicating through narration is actually a way of shaping the reality and the life of people. It's a magic that fascinates us even when we are spectators. And the sky, so we arrived finally at the sky will be the subject of your storytelling. And I have to say that you are very lucky, very, very lucky. Why lucky? Because the sky and the night have always been one of the great questions of humanity, and you can draw on almost infinite contents. Think of a company that sells nails. It'll be a little more difficult, okay, doing storytelling about nails. We can do it. In some situations we have to do it, but it is a little more difficult. Okay, now I will give you some ideas on how to apply storytelling to your story about the starry sky. Inspiration number 1, narrate, don't give information. Transmit the passion, first of all. And narrating means, first of all, transmit the passion for what you are telling with vitality, vivacity, and enthusiasm. Never forget it. But it also means that you have to create your own baggage of stories and learn to tell them by evoking images. This is very important, and choosing the right details. Okay, let's give you an example about this inspiration. Allora, imagine being on a guided tour and asking your public to look at the sky, and then ask them, as Daniele said before, can you find the constellation of Ursa Major? Okay, certainly someone will point it out because it's very famous. And let the participants express themselves, told by, from me to you. Then ask, do you know how it was formed? Okay, no, I'll tell you. Once upon a time, 3 hunters were chasing a bear. And at some point, they could hurt it. Bleeding in his desperate escape, the animal leaves behind the colors of autumn on the carpet of forest leaves, but finally manages to get to safety on the top of a mountain. From the top of the mountain, the bear makes a leap to the sky to become the constellation of Ursa Major. Okay, this is the myth of the cosmic ant, one of the oldest stories of humanity, a story that scholars have found in ancient Greece, in Europe, but also in Siberia and also in the Americas. So how is it possible that huge distribution range? Ask to the public and listen to the answers and comment. There is only one possible explanation. It's precisely because of this distribution range that we can say that the origin of the story belongs to the times when the American continent and the Euro-Asian continent were still united. That was between 18,000 and 28,000 years ago. So this story, probably originating in Eurasia, has accompanied men and women on their journey of discovery of the Americas for thousands and thousands of years. So one of the oldest story of us human beings tell us about the stars, because we have always tried to give meaning to the sky and to the stars. Okay, inspiration number 2. Tell about yourself, about your experiences, reliving the scene you are telling as it was happening in that moment, and engage the audience. For the first moment, create a direct relationship with the audience. What stories do they have to tell? Ask them and listen to their stories. Here is an example, a little storytelling, but done wrong. Listen to the storytelling done wrong. I realized that the sky was full of stars during a military service because I did a military camp in Tuscany in an isolated place, and the night there was no light pollution. Okay, the same story, but with storytelling done well. Have you ever wondered how many stars you can see in the sky and how many can we see with modern telescopes? I had never really looked after it, but one night, 30 years ago, looking up, I saw the starry sky as I had never seen it. I was in a military camp in the middle of nowhere, miles and miles from the nearest human agglomeration. But up there, who knows how far, thousands and thousands of bright dots, more or less large, more or less luminous, were looking at me. They occupied almost all the celestial vault, leaving the black sky a marginal residual space. I didn't believe my eyes. What a wonderful sight. Since then, I have looked at the night sky with different eyes, and I always hope to have as little light pollution as possible to relive an experience like that. Okay, little example, but I hope that you have felt the difference, okay? Inspiration number 3, and we are almost at the end of my presentation. Use quotes, aphorisms, and famous phrases to tell what you want to say. They will give authority and a touch of color to your narrative. Obviously, they must be relevant and add something to the story or define an issue unequivocally, okay? And then amaze, overturn the idea of people, amaze them with your story. For example, if today we are here, you and I, everyone, it is because a single star made it possible and makes it possible for us every day. Without our star, the sun, we could not be here. But there's more. We are made of stars. Within you, even at this moment, believe it or not, there are myriads of atoms coming from other galaxies. In our body, we host pieces of stars. This is the story of what happened after the Big Bang. And you can tell this story, the story of the trip of the atoms that probably you don't know. Go and find it. Okay, this is the end. Let's make a total recap. Telling stories is fundamental, but it is not enough. The matter is how to tell. So think in terms of story building. So build a story engaging your public, asking questions, creating mystery and expectation, amazing and surprising, putting yourself in it. And never forget, you must transmit passion and enthusiasm. Okay? Very last slide. I leave you with the Nebra disc. Another possibility for storytelling about stars. Thank you very much.